Listen, the Chicago Bulls front office search could be happening a lot faster than initially expected as Casey Johnson releases that we could see the new exec named as early as late this week and early next week, which is key, especially with the draft combine coming right around the corner. Also, with Matt Lloyd being the name that everybody's watching, Dennis Lindsey, Bryson Graham still in the mix, but a new guy has popped in, and that's Dave Lewin as well from the Boston Celtics. But I have a theory on what's going to happen there. And while Acme did not have success with a lot of the Bulls roster, we're seeing a lot of former Bulls have playoff success. What does that mean? We'll talk about all that and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Darren Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I want to start off with this. So Casey Johnson released yesterday that the Bulls front office search could be coming a lot faster than initially expected. Now, how do you take that, right? Like, I say this, the Bulls front office search has already been going on. Like, Acme was fired almost a month ago at this point, right? Like, and so because of that, you want this in place. And we always talked about the deadline kind of being that May 10th. That is the hard date that you want to have at least your new executive. Now, if the GM and the coach come a little bit after that, that's perfectly fine. But ideally, you want that new exec named before the draft combine. Not just because the draft lottery starts on the same day, but because you want somebody up close and personal that's scouting, that's interviewing, that's sitting there having these meetings with the players that are going to be in the draft combine. You want that done. So, final interviews have already been reportedly underway. They have already started. And so, when people ask why the draft lottery and combine timeline matters, it's because so much work gets done there. Like, you will hear GMs talk about how trades that happen later on in the offseason, maybe it doesn't happen until June, maybe it doesn't happen until closer to July, but a lot of that groundwork really gets started at the draft combine. Anytime you have something where so many, NBA execs, GMs, and scouts are all in one place, that is a place where a lot of business gets done. So just for that part of it, right, in case any moves do happen, we've already talked about how the Chicago Bulls can use their cap space to take on bad salary from other teams, stack assets if that ends up being the case, or you can even try to absorb a player like Isaiah Hartenstein from the if they do plan on kind of cutting him and opting out of that contract. So a lot of that becomes, a focus there. Then you have the interviews with players. You have the private workouts with players. Like, all that stuff is really important to get that done, right? And so I think after you hire your exec, which is really good, right? Once you get that done, of course, then you have to pivot towards, you have to do your coaching hire, right? You have to make that decision. That decision takes priority between that and the draft combine and those type of things. So if the Bulls are truly ready to name their new exec sooner rather than later, that is the best thing possible because it just shortens that timeline and it gets things really done sooner rather than later. And that's where the Bulls really need to be. They need to be getting stuff done. And so we'll see what's going to happen in that one. ESPN's Shams Charania did report that the plan is to have somebody in place before or after the draft combine, which is held in Chicago. On top of that, we got to always remember the draft combine is basically always in Chicago. And so with this draft being huge, with 2 picks in the top 20 at least, of course, you hope that at the draft lottery, you're going to get some luck and move into the top 4. It's in the team's best interest to get this done as soon as possible. Casey Johnson, the direct quote was this: "I'm told that can happen maybe late this week, early next week, and then obviously the coach search becomes priority number 1." So, this thing could all start moving pretty quickly, right? And I'm sure that any, front office exec candidate that the Chicago Bulls have, that guy probably already has in mind some coaches that he's going to want to interview. So I wonder how quick that turnaround is going to be. Now, do you go through the draft without a head coach? It's not the worst thing, right? Like that's not the worst thing in the world. Of course, you're going to have a kind of a mindset on what that coach's, philosophy is going to be, what their play style is going to be, all that type of stuff. But there's so much up in air with the Chicago Bulls. I would say that it's not as important to have a coach in place before the draft combine, but definitely you want to have your exec in place. You want to have that coach in place probably before the draft, which, the draft happens in June. So you want to get that done as soon as possible. So, overall, the timeline for the Chicago Bulls, it felt like a lot of runway, but it's really a very short runway at this point. Now you got to look at it, right? The draft is in about a week and a half. Is about when the draft lottery and the combine starts in about a week and a half. So even if you hire somebody at the end of this week, beginning of next week, that person will have about a week in place before, the draft combine starts. And if you hire somebody that's already in an NBA front office, some of that, stuff is already known. They're going to know some stuff, even though they haven't worked with the Bulls specific scouts. We don't even know what the scouts have been doing, who they've been taking their orders from. We don't know what's going on with that one. So, we'll see. Now, don't hold that quote from K.C. Johnson as gospel, right? Like, he's been floated stuff around that, it's kind of gone left, stuff like that, even though some people like to say that K.C. Johnson is the mouthpiece of the Bulls front office or ownership. But then when he says stuff that they don't want to hear, they try to act like you can't have it both ways. But that's just how Bulls fandom is right now, right? So, with the updated timeline, though, in a week, almost a week to go to the lottery, it's staff members, you do have to fill out your staff, GM being the biggest position, assistant GMs under that guy. And so the finalists, and then head coaches. And the head coaching search is a really important one, right? Because I think the head coaching search is going to tell us a lot, too, about what the Bulls' priority is. Are we going to hire somebody that's really good at player development? Are we going to hire more a win-now coach like we did with Billy Donovan? We don't know what's going to happen there. We've talked about head coaching candidates, everything from Chris Quinn to Micah Nori to Sam Cassell to, revisiting some former coaches like Taylor Jenkins, who, already signed a job. Mike Malone's already signed a job. So it feels like this is going to be a search where you're going to probably get a new first-time head coach, but there are going to be some coaches that are also fired from playoff teams. Jamal Mosley may be on his way out there. Jason Kidd could be on his way out of Dallas, not because of the record for the team, but because it seems like Jason Kidd wants a little bit more, control. He wants, some front office control. I don't know if the Bulls would even offer him that, but, there's a number of coaching candidates that are going to come in regards. So you're going to hear a lot of names in regards to that. How wide is that coaching search going to be as well? So I think says a lot. So, overall, hearing that the Bulls are getting to this place of, starting to make some of these decisions, I think it's going to be a domino effect. After you hear the exec, hired, you're probably going to hear interviews for coaches, interviews for GMs, a couple of days later. They may wait till after the draft combine just because of the gravity of it. It could be possible with that. Wait until the draft combine. We'll see to after the draft combine. The combine's the 10th through the 17th. So, we'll see what happens along those lines and in that area. But overall, this is a very important offseason, right? The 2 picks in the top 20, most cap space in the league on top of all of that. You got coaching searches, GM searches, all this type of stuff. This is going to be a lot of news in a condensed amount of time. The draft, the thing about all this should be done by the draft, and then you have free agency right after the draft. So it's all going to be back to back to back. This Bulls offseason is going to be hard hitting. It's going to be fast. And we're going to be covering it all here. You guys know nobody really gets into the nitty-gritty of the offseason like Chicago Bulls Central. We slowed down a little bit this week on draft prospect coverage just because so far for the first 2 days there have been so much news with the front office stuff. So, and then it didn't stop with that, right? So we did get word that there is an additional exec involved in this situation. So the list has grown. We heard that this one came from Jake Fisher of the Stein line, that Dave Lewin was part of the virtual interview process and did move on to the next round. Now, Dave Lewin is a assistant general manager with the Boston Celtics. He's been there for quite a while, right? Keep in mind, Jake Fisher was the one that initially released the list of the final 3 finalists. So now that Dave Lewin's name is also added into that, what does that mean? Right now, we've heard that Lloyd is the front runner, and I choose to believe that as well. But before we get into that, I want to get into the strengths of Dave Lewin. I want to talk about what he's done as a GM. So when you look at him, he comes from a variety of roles. He was the scouting coordinator, the director of scouting, the director of player personnel, and now the assistant GM, right? So he has basically had, jobs at every level in that front office, but being the official GM or a president of basketball ops role, right? He's been a key to identifying college talent and managing the NBA salary cap for that Boston Celtics team that has flirted and been over the first, second tax apron for a long time. Reportedly, he is somebody that has another analytical and data-driven mindset in regards to team building. This is something that we've heard through just about everybody who's been a candidate over this time, is that data-driven part of it is very high on that. And I wonder if that's something that the Bulls called out to the search firm, that they want somebody that has that data driven. Now, he combines that with traditional scouting, so it's not all just sitting behind a desk and just looking at data. He does like the modern analytics, followed by seeing it with the eye test, which is really good. He's been a key figure from Boston since 2012, right? So that's 14 years. And he was part of building building up what became a championship roster with Boston, which I think people got to remember, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were drafted with picks from the Brooklyn Nets, which the Celtics fleeced the Nets in that to get Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. They ate off that for a while there. But then there was also subsequent moves that were done, whether it was acquisitions and trades from other teams, whether it was signings, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, players like that. So he has an eye for identifying talent, which is really good. He's been credited with scouting a lot of players and identifying a lot of those players that Boston has drafted or signed over the years. He's also known as the whiz kid, right? Like when you come down to it, young, innovative, right? And I think that's important as well as to have an innovative mind. And if that's also paired with somebody who's young, that does a really great job in regards to it. So he's become a front office candidate for that. He also was named to the Athletics 40 under 40 list and built a reputation with helping make big decisions and trades, free agency, and has a reportedly meticulous approach and to insight in building your roster. Now, I have my own personal theory in regards to this, right? This is not something that's reported. This is not something any of this, but I wonder if Dave Lewin is looked at as somebody who could possibly be the GM under somebody that's hired as a president. Now, I want to be clear. That's not the reporting. That's not what was reported here. It's reported that he is in line for that president role. But I just wonder if, because a GM role would technically be a promotion for him, if you end up hiring a Matt Lloyd or a Dennis Lindsey, as your president of basketball ops, would they be interested in Dave Lewin coming in and being the GM under them? And then you could possibly have a succession plan on top of all of that. But you have then two strong front office candidates, both that can talk, both that have their own mindset, and then can work collaboratively to get things done for the Bulls. I think one thing that we all kind of, question is, what did Mark Eversley actually do? He didn't talk. He didn't address media. Most of the big decisions were looked at as AK decisions when it came down to it. That's the way they was also communicated to us. Not to say that Mark Eversley didn't have some type of say or a voice in the room. It just never seemed like Mark Eversley was at the same level of Arturis, or he had, the same level of responsibility. If you were to hire a Dennis Lindsey, a Matt Lloyd as a president of basketball ops, and then a Dave Lewin in there as your GM, that's not going to be somebody that's not going to have a say. It's not going to be somebody that's not going to be willing to be front forward in regards to things. And how we saw a lot of AK and Billy Donovan addressing the media, think about on, press conference day and all that type of stuff. Maybe it would be Dave Lewin and the president of basketball ops and allow the coach to kind of just focus on coaching, which I wouldn't be mad at all. Again, complete speculation on my part. I admit that it's speculative completely. This is not part of the reporting, but it just makes me wonder if that's a thing here, right? Like that way, Matt Lloyd and Dave Lewin, you can have two guys that you trust, both can do scouting, be heads of scouting. They can be involved in that part. They can both make decisions and they can work collaboratively. Everything that we've heard is the Bulls want to have a collaborative, organization. And what better way to have two strong candidates to do that in? And it's just speculation. Now, I would say this, this would be the Bulls interviewing a candidate for technically GM that before, and they could go to whoever they hire and say, hey, listen, we had a couple of interviews with Dave Lewin. We feel like he could be interested in the GM spot. Maybe you want to start there. It could be a lot of those type of things. Again, complete speculation. But Lewin is coming from the Boston Celtics organization, one that really does promote from within, right? You look at Brad Stevens moving from coach to the front office. Ime Udoka was on that track before, he had his scandal, right? Which then, opened up the door to Joe Mazzulla to come in there. But, that's an organization that has done things right for years, right? And so poaching from an organization that has built a steady thing that's what happens in the NBA. You want to poach from good organizations. Now, that doesn't always work. We poached AK from a good organization, and it didn't work out, right? But, you can't have that worry and concern. You got to do your interviews, believe in the people that you're bringing in, and then let the things fall where they may at that point in time. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But let me know what you guys think on that one down below. With that said, though, I want to talk about, I talked a little bit about Dosunmu yesterday, and not only the playoffs that he's having, but the chance of course, him bringing the new front office bringing Dosunmu back. It is what it is with that one. We'll see what happens. Is it likely? Hell no, right? I still want to be clear in that. I don't think that it's super likely that Dosunmu comes back to the Chicago Bulls. If he does, great. If he doesn't, we'll see, right? But overall, I'll say this. When you look around the playoffs, you do see former Chicago Bulls that are balling. And the reason why I want to call this out is that a lot of Bulls fans over the years have talked about, well, we don't have guys. None of these guys would be an impact player on a playoff team. None of these guys would be that. And you really just never know, right? Like we saw Tony Bradley play actually important minutes for an NBA Finals team a couple of years ago, right? And now you have Wendell Carter, you have Dosunmu, you have these players that are really contributing to their playoff team. Wendell Carter's probably having the best basketball of his career right now, going up against Jalen Duren. Angel Reese may have a little bit of say in that and a little bit of motivation in that, right? But you look at Dosunmu in the playoff breakout that he's having, and he is absolutely having a breakout. And this free agency is going to be very lucrative to Dosunmu, whether he stays in Minnesota or goes another place. He's about to get paid. And this stuff, it's signs that we started seeing of this with Io. The problem that I think a lot of Bulls fans' mindset has is that they'll look at a player and then say, well, we didn't win with them. That means they weren't that good. And it's like, no, you still need a team to win, right? You still need a team to factor in to being a winner. And so, and the thing that I always fight back on is anytime somebody has that mindset of, well, this player will never do X on a winning team, it's like, you never know. It depends on how that winning team is constructed. It depends on also the role. It depends on a lot of different things. Like you're seeing Luke Kornet be a big part of postseason minutes for his team this season. And he did it before for the Boston Celtics as well, right? You're seeing Wendell Carter, and I've been somebody that I've said for a long time, Wendell is just Wendell. Like, the thing in the Vooch trading Wendell wasn't the big loss in that. I say that, I firmly believe that as well. But what he's doing in this playoffs, man, you got to give Wendell Carter some credit. Wendell Carter is balling out right now and looks like every bit of the two-way player that people had hoped he was going to be, even being a little bit as an undersized center. Wendell Carter is looking really damn good right now, right? And then, of course, Dosunmu. Averaging over 20 points per game in the playoffs, the 43-point explosion that he had. Yeah, they lost their last game. Winning the next one's going to be really important for them. But, he's having such a renaissance. And it's just somebody that people are finally looking at and realizing, like, hey, the national media, a lot of people are just now starting to realize who and what Dosunmu is because he's been on the Bulls and they haven't watched the Chicago Bulls in a long time or very, very frequently. But you just look at what these guys are doing, man. And it just goes to show you that, talent evaluation is not as easy as what people make it out to be because it's so situational, right? Like you have to have the right team, the right role, the right coaching, the right situation. And you're seeing Dosunmu, even in his 43-point game, not a lot of those points came from the mid-range, but you're seeing him just having that mid-range open and the fact that teams have to guard him in that mid-range area, what that really means, right? So when you talk about this, I look at this and I say this, that it comes down to, for me personally, is that it is a mix of the front office and coaching. And I know people don't like to hear that because all of a sudden now people act like Billy Donovan is this guy that's above reproach in regards to what he did coaching-wise. No, Billy Donovan had some shortcomings coaching-wise. And to act like it didn't happen is asinine, in my opinion. Like, the revisionist history now, people want to act like, well, it wasn't Billy's fault. Nobody said it was all Billy's fault. Nope, it's not all one person's fault. But Billy Donovan did have his fault into the talent evaluation and how talent was used. The one thing I've always pointed out about Billy Donovan is he doesn't always use players to their best strengths. One thing I go to is Zach LaVine is one of the best catch and shoot players in the NBA. We never ran a lot of catch and shoots for him while he was here. The inbounds plays, right? Like you have a player that's called the sideline out of bounds wizard in Josh Giddey. And Bulls fans be like, well, you gotta have the players that can run the inbounds play. Billy Donovan's inbounds plays out of times outs were some of the most horrible we've ever seen. And that goes back to the Thunder days, right? So, there was a shortcoming with coaching as well into all of this. And overall, the thing that I learned that I'm taking away from this and watching former Bulls in the playoffs, and we saw it last season, we saw seasons ago with like Derrick Jones Jr., Daniel Gafford before as well. Like what we're learning in this case is that you have to build the roster the right way. And that is something that we have not really seen here in Chicago, literally since Pax was the GM and a little bit after, like early on in Gar first being the GM. That's because we inherited, that a lot of that team. And, that was when the Derrick Rose MVP season and all that. But we just have not had a very well-constructed team that felt like it was built through a thought process of how the fit is going to work. That is how you can maximize talent, is having players in the proper roles, in the proper fits, and thinking about that as you're building a team. And that is overall what I hope this next, front office brings is competent team building, competent fit, competent drafting, competent free agents. Like for a long time, it just felt like AK just did whatever was in front of him. Like I will give him credit that initial going out and getting DeMar and Lonzo and Alex Caruso, it did seem like there was a thought process between how that team was built. But after Lonzo went down, it was almost like AK was just holding on to the seat of his pants and just going with whatever came his way. You gotta build correctly. And so we got to see what this next front office is going to do. And that's why, when we talk about here and over on Locked On Bulls, the fact that, you got to leave yourself open to how this roster could be rebuilt and reconstructed is because fit has to be at the forefront of how you're building this team. It just has to be. If it's not, it's going to be tough, right? And that's not even to mention, like I talk about Alex Caruso already showing his value on a championship team. Coby White, being on a team that try to make the playoffs, right? And so it's how much this exposes AK's talent evaluation and how bad of the trade value was because of AK's improper team building and improper taking strikes where you should have. And that just is what it is. So, we'll see what this new front office can bring, but this is just the one thing that I really hope that we see better from this next front office is competent team building, competent talent evaluation, and if you're going to move off talent, move off of them while their value's actually at its highest, so that way you're actually getting something back that can actually help you rather than hurt you when you're looking back saying you didn't get the value in an Dosunmu trade. That's what the hope should be, and we'll see if they can compete that and be a more competent front office than what we've had with the last two. So that's the thought process there. But let me know what you guys feel and think on all of that down below. With the Bulls expected to name their next exec sooner rather than later, and Dave Lewin now being entered into that mix as well, could the Chicago Bulls be building a modern front office with Matt Lloyd and David Leuen? Let me know what you guys think on that and how you want to see this roster built going forward. Make sure you guys make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.